Blackouts across Havana, fuel tanks running dry, and now Moscow steps in. As U.S. pressure tightens around Cuba's oil lifeline, Russia is moving to reinforce an old ally in the middle of a deepening energy crisis. Cuba's foreign minister has landed in Moscow at a critical moment for the island. Facing worsening blackouts and severe fuel shortages, Havana is struggling after renewed U.S. pressure on oil supplies. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez met Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov and was scheduled to hold talks with President Vladimir Putin. Lavrov urged Washington to refrain from what he described as blockading Cuba. U.S. President Donald Trump recently warned that any nation selling oil to Havana could face tariffs, tightening restrictions on the island's already fragile energy imports. Russian State Duma deputy also met Cuban foreign minister. The Russian official said, "We do not abandon our friends in trouble."
I am here as a bearer of the warm embrace from our people to Prussia, with whom we are united by a historical and especially fraternal relationship. I am also here to convey greetings and expressions of affection from the Cuban Parliament and from the President of the National Assembly. And also great friends of Russia, such as Army General Raúl Castro Ruz and the First Secretary President Miguel Díaz-Canel. Y venido a expresar profound gratitude for the permanent support provided by the Russian Federation to Cuba, as was anticipated several times by our leaders. The current international order, which was created to be deeply reformed, however, it is being destroyed nationally. And also great friends, Russia, like the general, will only do this after ratification. Priority, the Republic of Cuba, with a special and strategic bond with the Russian Federation. I am the bearer of this embrace.
Cuba is a crucial strategic partner for us within the Latin American region. Our nations share identical positions on the fundamental issues of the international agenda.
Ignores and bullies persistently.
It's evident that Washington has now embarked on an aggressive campaign against Cuba, particularly following the military operation in Venezuela on January 3rd. Under the prevailing conditions, the principal aim of the White House is to effect a complete change in the governmental structure of the island through the sustained imposition of an unprecedented economic and energy stranglehold.
The international order.
You can rest assured, as we say, we don't abandon our friends when they're in trouble.
We are going to have to abandon our friends.
We will make every possible effort through parliamentary channels to provide all the assistance we can to the fraternal Cuban people.
Now, Russia appears ready to respond. According to a diplomat cited by Russian media, Moscow is preparing to send crude oil and refined fuel cargoes to Cuba in the near future, described as humanitarian assistance. Fuel shortages have intensified across the island, affecting power plants and refineries. The lack of steady oil imports has deepened electricity outages and strained daily life. The renewed Moscow-Havana engagement underscores shifting geopolitical alignments as Russia signals support for Cuba, while Washington maintains economic pressure aimed at political and economic reforms.
This is no ordinary travel disruption. This is a full-scale repatriation operation unfolding in real time as Russia scrambles to bring thousands of its citizens home from a Cuba gripped by an aviation fuel crisis. Moscow's Civil Aviation Authority has confirmed that 2 major Russian airlines are now prioritizing evacuation flights after severe jet fuel shortages left aircraft unable to refuel on the island. What began as logistical difficulty has escalated into an urgent extraction effort. Rossiya Airlines, owned by Aeroflot, has revised its entire flight schedule to ensure the evacuation of Russian tourists currently stranded in Cuba. Nordwind Airlines has followed suit, suspending regular services and operating one-way return flights out of Havana, Varadero, Holguin, and Cayo Coco. Officials cite difficulties with refueling aircraft in Cuba as the driving force behind the dramatic shift. Without reliable jet fuel supplies, airlines cannot guarantee outbound and return operations, forcing them to pivot entirely towards repatriation. The Russian Union of Travel Industry estimates that at least 4,000 Russian tourists are currently in Cuba. For many, holidays have abruptly transformed into uncertainty as airports struggle to sustain international departures. Cuban aviation authorities warned earlier this week that jet fuel would not be available at international airports for up to a month. The announcement effectively triggered a countdown for foreign carriers to extract their nationals before operations grind to a halt. Russia's response has been swift and strategic. Rossiya has organized multiple one-way flights to Moscow and confirmed that all operations to Cuba will be suspended by late February. Refunds are being offered, but the immediate priority is clear: get Russian citizens home. Nordwind Airlines has adopted a similar approach, focusing solely on outbound evacuation flights from resort hubs popular with Russian tourists. The message from Moscow is unmistakable: safety and return come first. The crisis is rooted in a deepening energy shortfall on the island. Cuba's reliance on imported oil has left it exposed, and the halt in Venezuelan supplies earlier this year has intensified the strain. As jet fuel reserves dry up, the aviation sector has become one of the first visible casualties. Canadian airlines, including Air Canada, WestJet, and Air Transat, have also cancelled services and deployed empty aircraft southbound to retrieve passengers. But Russia's coordinated repatriation stands out for its scale and urgency. For Cuba, the implications are severe. Tourism is a lifeline for the island's economy, and the sudden withdrawal of international carriers threatens to compound an already fragile financial landscape. For Russia, however, the priority remains singular and immediate: extract its citizens, stabilize the situation, and reassess routes only when fuel security is restored. Amid repatriation of Russian tourists from Cuba, U.S. President Donald Trump bluntly declares that Havana is now a failed state under mounting pressure.
Speaking aboard Air Force One, President Donald Trump declared that the United States is actively negotiating with Havana as the island struggles under a White House-imposed oil blockade. He added that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is leading direct discussions with Cuban officials and urged Havana to strike what he described as a necessary humanitarian deal. The administration has tightened trade restrictions, citing Cuba's ties with Iran, Russia, and China, and has warned it will punish any nation that sells or supplies oil to the island. The impact is already visible. Multiple airlines have suspended service as sanctions threaten aviation fuel supplies, disrupting international travel and compounding economic strain. For years, Cuba relied heavily on oil shipments from Venezuela under the leadership of Nicolás Maduro, but that lifeline has now been halted. The result is an energy squeeze with ripple effects across healthcare, tourism, and everyday life. Trump insisted that Cuban Americans would welcome a deal allowing freer movement and reconnection with relatives on the island. He also signaled strong opposition to what he described as decades of mistreatment under Castro-era governance, saying he is closely watching how the situation unfolds. Despite the mounting pressure, Trump stopped short of openly endorsing regime change, though he remarked that if such a move were considered, it would not be a difficult operation. In the meantime, he said plainly, there is an embargo. No oil, no money, no anything.
You're warning Cuba to make a deal. What does that deal look like? What do you want them to do?
Cuba is right now a failed nation. They don't even have jet fuel to get for airplanes to take off. They're clogging up their runway. We're talking to Cuba right now, and Marco Rubio talking to Cuba right now, and they should absolutely make a deal because it's really a humanitarian threat. And we have a lot of great Cuban Americans, and they're going to be very happy when they're going to be able to go back and say hello to their relatives and do things that they should have been allowed to do for a long time. I'm very interested in the people that are here that were treated so badly by Castro and the Cuban authorities. They have been treated horribly. So we'll see how it all turns out. But Cuba and us, we are talking. In the meantime, there's an embargo. There's no oil, there's no money, there's no anything.
If a deal isn't made, would you consider an operation like the one in Venezuela?
I don't want to answer that. Why would I answer that? If I was, it wouldn't be a very tough operation, as you can figure. But I don't think that'll be necessary.
International reaction has been swift. Last week, Mexico dispatched 2 ships carrying 800 tons of aid to Cuba, with further shipments planned to address urgent humanitarian needs.
We have stated that Mexico is doing everything on its part to be able to generate a dialogue that allows within the framework of the sovereignty of Cuba. Because this is extremely important, because it is furthermore our fundamental principle, the self-determination of all people, to generate the necessary conditions for a truly peaceful dialogue. And also that Cuba, without any other nation imposing sanctions, can receive oil and its essential derivatives for its daily functioning and its everyday operations. We are sending different kinds of aid, different kinds of support. The ships are arriving today. As soon as they return, we're going to send more support of various kinds, and we are insisting that Mexico can act as the state, the nation that opens its doors for this dialogue to unfold. Evidently, it depends on the parties reaching an agreement.
Meanwhile, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel sharply condemned Washington's actions, accusing the United States of attempting to strangle the Cuban economy through tariffs and coercive measures. In posts on X, Díaz-Canel described the blockade as unjustified and politically motivated, framing it as an attack on Cuban sovereignty.